Good morning. You're listening to What's at Stake on WPFW 89.3, and I am Reverend Graylin Scott Hagler, your host every second Wednesday of the month. Our executive producer is Verna Avery Brown, and our engineer this morning is Michael Nasala. We are a listener-supported program, and your contributions help keep us on the air, bringing to you jazz and justice. We are bringing to you this morning the justice mandate in our mission. Today, this program is pre-recorded. We will not be able to take your calls this morning, but we want you to continue to stay plugged in. We're going to be talking about a hot issue today. In 1973, a decision was rendered by the U.S. Supreme Court that declared that the Constitution of the United States protects a woman's liberty to choose to control her own reproductive rights. Whether or not to have an abortion, with or without any excess governmental restrictions. And this has caused an heartburn for many in the church, many in the evangelical community, and the politically conservative. The right wing has been promising to have Roe overturned and have been whittling away at it through arguments and demonstrations. The right to life marches have grown over the years and have become more vocal, and political extremists have established opposition to abortion as a political litmus test. And there is now a fresh, real uproar since a draft opinion was leaked from the US Supreme Court, which appears to suggest that the court is poised to overturn Roe and therefore take away any reproductive rights and control from women. As the extremists deliberately packed the court to push it towards their political agenda, it should have been clear that dismantling a woman's right to choose was one of their targets, but not the only target. They have already seriously damaged voting protection in this country, and if the extremists succeed in dismantling a woman's choice, they will annihilate what is left of voting rights, will turn back the clock on same-gender marriage, and will attempt to roll back the rights that people have fought and won over the years. This attack is an attack on us all. To discuss this topic, we have with us two women, two strong leaders, two clergy women who have been seasoned in the struggle for justice. Reverend Dr. Wanda Thompson serves as the pastor of Ambassador Baptist Church, where she has been a member since 1976. She is a native Washingtonian growing up in Ward 7 and a 37-year resident of the Fairlawn community. Reverend Thompson received her bachelor's degree in psychology from Dickinson College and her master's degree and PhD from Temple University in clinical psychology. She is a licensed psychologist in both DC and Maryland. Reverend Dr. Wanda Thompson received her Master's of Divinity degree from Howard University School of Divinity in 1996. Reverend Thompson is active in the Wednesday Clergy Fellowship, Sister Clergy Group, and Ward 8 Food Pantry Collaborative. Reverend Dr. Wanda Thompson traveled with me and other clergy to Palestine in 2016. We also have with us the Reverend Patricia Fears, who is the pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in Washington, DC. She is a graduate of Spelman College and earned her Master's of Divinity degree from Wesley Theological Seminary. She has a passion to serve the church and the community. She has a background of community engagement, serving on various boards and committees, and speaking on issues of social justice. Reverend Fears also traveled with us to Palestine in 2016. We have two women who are deeply rooted in the faith, leaders in the church. And we want to thank them for being with us today. And I want to urge them to share an opening perspective on what's at stake, where we are, the threat that is going on, and we will carry on our discussion from there. I'm going to ask if Dr. Thompson, why don't you open up and share with us some of your views on this subject?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for having me today. I think it's an issue that is complex and it's not a simple thing. I think when it comes to the issue of reproductive rights when it comes to the issue of abortion, first of all, I want to say that I think that's not something that any woman enters into lightly. It is a serious thing. People try to make it to be either pro-life or anti-life. That's not the situation either. What I think we're talking about here with people who are demanding that women be able to have autonomy over their bodies is pro-choice. We need to be able to make decisions with regard to our own bodies. I'm talking about women at this point, to make choices. And I think when we're looking at the larger issue, that this is just a gateway to overturning other rights that people have, overturning the rights when it comes to voting rights, overturning rights when it comes to same-sex marriage, overturning rights when it comes to other laws that have been in place to protect people's civil rights. The other thing that I would say is that many people who are consider themselves pro-life, when it comes to what happens to children once they're born to someone, they're not always doing the things that would help to take care of those children, to take care of the mothers, not so invested in what happens to children after birth. So I think it's just really important for us to understand that this is a pro-choice issue, and that women have the right to make decisions about their own reproductive rights, about their own bodies. And that's true for we should have the right to make decisions about our own bodies and not have somebody make those decisions for us.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Reverend Patricia Fears.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me as well. I'm so grateful to be on this prestigious panel. And I do have to echo the sentiments of Dr. Thompson, because it is so true that the issue at hand goes far beyond just the headlines. The thing that is troubling to me is not only the issue itself, but the fact that it was a leaked document, that the court has now become politicized. And that's not what it was designed to be. And this is troubling because of the ability to turn over all of the other rights that we have been talking about, the right to voting rights. We're talking about same-sex marriages. These are issues that they shouldn't be politicized, and they've already been agreed to. And you're trying to sneak and do it by having it leaked out. It becomes problematic. It's just like, when is the government, supposed to be for us, for the people? And justice has to be just that. It can't be just for a group of people. It has to be for all of the people. When you look at this country and the health disparity amongst the Black and Brown people, when you talk about the issues of even infant mortality, as Dr. Thompson mentioned, there's problems when educated women of color that have knowledge of what's going on could go to the hospital and still come out with a non-viable fetus. It's problematic if you carry it to term. And to try to moralize this issue is very, very disheartening. As it's been stated, it's a pro-choice. Let women decide. And many of them will decide, what they do with their bodies.
And it's important why we wanted women to have this discussion, because far too many men are engaged in this discussion. And in a sense, we need to just simply sit back, and you need to listen to what thinking women are saying about this subject and about the implications of it. And so it's really important that we hear in such a way. It's always interesting when we talk about the Supreme Court, because, they've been clear about packing the Supreme Court to try to come out with the political issues and decisions that they have wanted for a long, long time. When we witnessed the damage to the Voting Rights Act, that was a prelude to what is to come, right? I mean, all this stuff is a prelude, because that's the way that they've been going. And then in these last 3 appointments solidified that. solidified this political agenda. So whether this is a draft or whether this is the final one, it really doesn't matter. We know where this court is and where it's headed to. And how do we deal with these issues? How do we educate the public, one, about these issues and where we need to go from here? Any thoughts about that, either one of you?
Well, I'm a big proponent of the conversation. When we start hearing stories and afford and allow safe space for people to talk about what it really means, how it will impact them, then you could start formulating strategies to move forward and address and change. I think far too often, and you mentioned it, Reverend Hagler, so clearly, too many men are having conversations and deliberations on what somebody else is supposed to do. And we have far too long been in a country where one segment, the white males, get to determine everything that happens in this country. And it's just not right. And it has to stop. I mean, there's a reason why the latest judge, Ketanji Brown Jackson, went through so much to get on that Supreme Court. And you have a gentleman who had a very interesting record, slid in, and a woman who was definitely anti-abortion got into the court. She just came up and showed up, and with little experience at all. And these are the things that people are looking at, and they want to talk about it. When I'm in my church, there are women who are struggling that have had abortions, and they want to have some faith-based consultations. They want to, because it is difficult, like Dr. Thompson says, they don't come to this decision easily. This isn't something, oh yeah, I'm just going to do this. This is my new way of contraception. That's not it. This is a struggle. But they need to have somebody that is there not being accusatory and making it seem like a penalty because it's done, and that there is damnation upon them for this, because they are already in a volatile state. And so I think having that space to have the conversation is the beginning of how people could start really diving into the issue.
I'm gonna push back, Dr. Thompson. I'm gonna push back with this. You're both ministers. You're both faith leaders. How can faith leaders advocate for a woman's right to choose? Shouldn't you be fundamentally pushing for that woman to give birth to a child and not have this idea of a choice? I'm just playing. I'm just putting it out there, because people think that way.
Okay, let me address that for a moment. From my faith tradition, I believe that God has given all of us free will and the ability to make choices. And that does not mean, let me be clear on this. Now, that doesn't mean that a choice someone else makes is the choice that you would make. But I think we must understand that all people have the right for free will to make the choices. And that's going to be a choice that people have to live with themselves. Now, in terms of faith, we cannot legislate what people do with their own bodies. We can advise, we can counsel, we can make suggestions, but the bottom line is that people have to make their own decisions. And that's certainly in keeping with, I think, God's plan for us to be able to make our own choices. And the other thing is that from my faith tradition too, there's a separation between church and state, and that one does not get into, the state should not get into the affairs of the church. And as pastors, we do have to deal with people who have gone through any number of experiences, including abortion. And again, I think it's important to know that this is not something people do lightly, but they're considering, and particularly when we're thinking about women are smart. They have, they can make their own decisions. They can educate themselves. They can, think about the issues, think about it, how it's going to impact them, how it's going to impact the people around them. And then they make the best choice that they can make. So again, I think this is very much pro-choice, and choice is really something that, in terms of scripture, in terms of religion, in terms of everything, is right there for us to see. And we just have to embrace the fact that we are all free moral agents. We make the choices that we make. And some of the people who might make a choice not to support a woman's right to make a choice in her life might also be people who have no problem pulling the lever for the electric chair, or, something else. We're not talking about somebody who is doing something because out of some sense of right that they're going to impose on everybody else. We have to understand that women are making a personal choice, and no one has the right to be able to tell somebody what to do with their own body. So.
Right. Now, Reverend Fears, it says that you see very strongly the Catholic Church out there, and can you just talk about that? What makes their faith position, or is their faith position any different than your faith position?
I would say it does vary. In my faith tradition, I don't deal with one particular, like the hierarchy of the Pope. That's what the Pope says is what the church does in the Catholic tradition. My faith tradition, I go directly to the source. I go to God. And we believe that we have the right to free will. We get to make these choices. And the thing that when we talk about pro-choice, that's pro-choice with everything. So, because once you start this is almost like a gateway to so many other things that you're just going to negate my choice. If I don't have the choice as a woman to decide what to do with my body, then who does? Who does? Who gets to determine that? And I believe that God does have the final say. God will be with that woman every step of the way. If she is connected to a faith tradition, if she has an understanding that that's it, she may be struggling economically. This could be an abuse that has taken place. We don't know, but we need to let this woman make the decision to decide. And I think if the Catholic Church wants to go ahead and go down that road and think that this becomes a moral issue, then they're stepping on some political things that are far beyond the boundaries of just a faith tradition. Because what's happening when the Supreme Court steps in, this is no longer a faith activity. This becomes them deciding that it's legally something that takes place. So they take God out of the picture and then try to frame it, put it in a God frame. But the actuality, it's the toxicity of this society that is trying to determine who has value and who does not. And God frowns on that. And that should be the case with all traditions.
But I think
I can also say, Reverend Hagler, that as a descendant of enslaved people who had no jurisdiction over their own bodies and what happened, I think it's really important for us also to understand the importance of being able to know that you are an autonomous being and that you can have jurisdiction over your own body, and that other people should not have the right to force you to do anything that's not in keeping with your own decision making. So.
And what's also interesting, I thank you for that, and what's also interesting is that the church, in the Catholic Church, has a hierarchical position of being against reproductive rights. And I'm saying it that way because that's what choice is, the right to control your own reproduction. But the fact is that the majority, the rank and file of Catholic members want to keep abortion legal. So there is this split, obviously, between the hierarchy and the membership of the Catholic Church. And in fact, when you look at the society as a whole, statistically, society as a whole, majority want to make sure that reproductive rights remain intact. And so in a sense, all of this push is actually against the majority of people in this country. And so whether you're talking about it along Protestant lines or along Catholic lines, it's a push against the majority point of view, which says something very dangerous and very tragic, I think. Don't you? Either one.
Absolutely. I think that, again, I believe that when we start framing issues on the faith line, I mean, I have clergy friends that won't identify themselves as evangelical, and because it has been politicized, where you take religious language, you take religious speak, and you juxtapose it against some political agenda, that you start tarnishing what both of them are supposed to be, and it becomes quite divisive. And this is the gateway that we're opening to a total destruction of who has the right to say what about somebody else. And as Dr. Thompson had mentioned, when you talk about people that are descendants of slaves and people that are owned, this gets into the psyche of people. Why are you once again trying to return to this? And why is it okay for a certain group of people and not for another group of people? And we have to stop allowing people to take, and this is where I get upset. Don't take advantage of my God and my faith. And don't tell me how I can exercise my religion. I'm not going to tell you any way you get to your God, your vehicle, get in it, go. But you don't get permission to tell me that mine isn't right. And that's what we're dealing with right now.
From a Pew Research Center, it reports that all U.S. adults, 61% out of all adults, want to keep basically Roe intact, that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. Of Protestants, it's a little bit less, 43% to 55%. White evangelicals, it is 20% to 77%. So 20%, only 20% want to keep it legal. White not evangelicals, 60% want to keep it legal. Black Protestant, 64% want to keep it legal in all or most cases. And among Catholics, 56% that want to keep it legal in most or all cases. Those who are religiously unaffiliated, 83%. And so that's the Pew Research Center. So in a sense, this is really about minority opinion, and definitely not about majority opinion. And so it's really even worse than we want to imagine, because this is, in a sense, tyranny.
Right. Absolutely. This is an attack on our system that doesn't allow you to get arrested, or you're not being violated. There's no smoking gun or tear gas. It's not a January 6th kind of insurrection piece. It is the small, consistent erosion of the rights of people in this country. And it has got to stop, because I was in a car not too long ago in an Uber, and I had asked the young lady, why'd you come to America? And she says, because it's free. You can do what you want to do here. And I said, well, right now, and because obviously by the time I get to where I'm going, things may change. That's problematic. That is very problematic. And that's what we have to address, is the fact that if we start this little ripping away, it becomes a great tear, that this majority gets to rule, and they should not.
That's right.
And I think it's important, again, to just kind of come back to the fact that it's a personal decision about your own life. It's a decision that's made about how you're going to live your life. And what it has to say about whether or not you feel able to have a family or not. It's about people making choices. And again, I don't think people take this lightly. It's the same, again, it's a gateway to things. And it hasn't been that long that there have been interracial marriages that have been allowed. We're talking about same-sex marriages. We're talking about people making personal decisions in their own life. And I think when you begin rolling back individual rights, rolling back people's right to make decisions like that, then that's problematic. And I think we really have to look at that big picture, because this is not the end of it. This is definitely not the end of it. As you say, this is minority rights and things that people don't like, and they want to impose it upon other people. This is just the beginning.
If you're tuning in just now, you're listening to What's at Stake on WPFW-FM 89.3. I'm your host, Reverend Graylin Scott Hagler, and we have been talking with Reverend Patricia Fears and Reverend Dr. Wanda Thompson. Reverend Fears is the pastor of Fellowship Bible Church, and Reverend Thompson is the pastor of Ambassador Baptist Church. Two women of faith, two religious leaders engaging in this discussion about Roe versus Wade and where do we actually go from here. And as we come and talk about this issue even more, Reverends, I think that what we need to really focus upon is the idea that we've been straining for years to try to declare. I'm not talking about we, I'm talking about that we out there, trying to declare the U.S. as a Christian nation. And I always say, the problem is, whose Christianity are we talking about? Because we act as if even the use of the word Christian is somehow monolithical, when it's different perspectives and different approaches that we see all the time. I mean, one of the classic splits we saw was doing the whole Trump mega stuff, when the white evangelicals were over here arguing about something that the rest of us wasn't even arguing about. And I think that what we got to talk about is a little bit this whole religious flare that continues to come at us in this country. Because everything, as you put it, I think Reverend Fears, is crouched in this religious language very often. The right wingers want to crouch it in this idea of morality, in the idea of what they think is right or wrong, which is their definition, therefore, of some kind of perspective, religious perspective. Anybody want to comment on that?
Well, one of the things that you will read in the scriptures that we use, the Bible, judgment is God's. And we spend a lot of time determining who we think is good enough, smart enough, the right complexion, the right understanding of who gets benefits. And we have to stop and pull back on that and start looking at humanity as humanity, just across the board. Because you can't pick and choose when you want to be religious. I tell my church all the time, you just can't be religious on Sunday because you are not working out your faith. This isn't something that you do. It's not easy, but it's possible. So we have to work it out. And I get frustrated, I get angry, and I get quite argumentative with people that determine that there's only one way to worship God and there's only one thing that God will accept, as if they just had him over for lunch and they've had this deep conversation and they gave them all the knowledge. And that's not the case. Free will has a special place in the life of believers. Even when you're trapped behind bars, you have the free will and you could feel that spiritual uplift. But for you to tell me that it's okay for you, Mr. White Male, to live your best life, but not you, Miss Brown Female, Mr. whoever else that doesn't look like that one category, it's really taints and spits on the faith movement itself. Our church had been attacked just a few years ago, we had to get Homeland Security. We received a grant because the former pastor and founder blessed the late term abortion clinic, blessed it, prayed over it. And the people called to the point and harassed the administration to the point where I have people that won't come back to help in the church, to work in the church, because they're terrified of people that may attack them. Now, what is that about? Where is your faith? What are you practicing that allows you to belittle and attack someone? I didn't see anywhere in the Bible where Jesus was just beating on people. Even when Peter cut off the ear of the soldier, Jesus picked it up and put it back together. We have to stop with this division and this divisiveness and start talking and connecting.
And one of the things I think is always interesting, and I sort of joke and put it this way, but it always hits me, is that people love to have a God that hate all the same things they hate.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So in other words, they make up their God as they go along, right? And so I want to conform God to them rather than they being conformed to this greater concept of God. One of the things that he talked about in this leaked document is that somehow this goes against the traditions of America. Anybody want to comment on that? How overturning the reason, one of the rationale for overturning Wade is that it goes against the traditions of America.
Well, I think that's wrong, just from the standpoint that one of the things that people often lift up as a value in this country is individual freedom. Individual freedom and the ability to be able to do things for yourself, the pursuit of happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, all of that. And it really speaks to people being able, again, to make choices for themselves. The young woman in the car that Reverend Fears was talking about, she talked about coming to this country because of the freedoms that are there. And I think that that's important. And we really can't overlook that people have the ability to make choice. And when it really comes down to it, that's really what it's about. It's about people's ability to make choices for themselves, to have autonomy over their own body. And I think when we think about this country, people, even then, when we think about the original sin of this country, it is in trying to, commit genocide for many of the peoples of this country, the First Nation, enslaved people, and all. That runs counter to being able to, to protect life. And so I think, again, we're talking about making a choice. And if I could just insert this in somewhere, you may get to it at some point, but I just want to say, probably most of us know people who have had abortions. We may not consciously know it. What I should say is that we have known people who've had abortions, whether you know it or not. But I bet most people in this country have come across folks in their lives who have had abortions, who have not shared that with them, people that they think well of, people that they're in relationships with. And again, it's a personal choice.
And I have to say, it is in tradition with this country. This country is into, and I think Dr. Thompson picked it up, is to slaughter and kill and maim and do whatever is necessary to subjugate those that are not in line with whatever the thinking of the quote unquote authorities of the day. So that's where, if it's going to be in line with anything, it's in line with the destruction. And instead of the illusion that the country puts forth, a lot of times it projects as if we have all of these liberties, but we know for a fact that that's not the reality, and that's not what we're dealing with day to day. We understand the difference in pay alone, the difference between a white male getting paid and a white female getting paid, and against any other person of color. We understand the housing disparities. We understand the health disparities. Disparity to those that do not look like the ones in authority is the tradition of the country. And it is something that we have an opportunity at this critical time to adjust before it gets totally out of hand and we're not able to ever reel it back in. Because just like Dr. Thompson says, not only do we know somebody sitting next to us, we don't know why they're crying, that may have given up their child through abortion. We also know there's a generation of women that are still pained in their senior years with having gone to the back alley abortion clinics because no legal one was available to them. And they have either had the child that was maimed, have some sort of psychological or mental disorder that they are struggling in their bodies, or they bled out, or they died. That these are things that we have to shut down and stop. These are choices that do not belong in the hands of those that are not impacted by it.
Exactly.
I want you to hear part of this draft because it's interesting if you have not heard it or read it. One part of it says, at the time of Roe, 30 states still prohibited abortion at all stages. In the years prior to that decision, about a third of the states had liberalized their laws, but Roe abruptly ended that political process. It imposed the same highly restrictive regime on the entire nation, and it effectively struck down the abortion laws of every single state. So
Again,
you're back to an argument of states' rights, right? That's where they're headed, right? That the state should be superior.
mm-hmm. And that these little dog whistles that you put out with your verbiage, you use words like the liberal use and all of this language is just dog whistles to agitate and make sure that there's constant division in this nation. If we are going to be who we say we are, if we are going to be a United States, we can't afford to go state by state by state. Do you know how difficult it is, even when you move from one state to the next, to figure out, is your driver's license legit? So you have to go down to their DMV, got to take a new test. So could you imagine just going somewhere on holiday and having to figure out every regulation, law that's going on?
Mm-hmm.
It's painful and divisive.
And remember this, because I'm gonna go back to the old race argument. You know, you had free states and you had slave states.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, and that was the reality, right? Until the Dred Scott decision came along, because he said, hold it, I was a slave, but we moved to a free state. Mm-hmm. So does that mean I'm free any longer now? And the Supreme Court, in a highly politicized ruling under the Chief Justice, said that basically Dred Scott was not free, and that the Negro was so inferior that there was not any rights that the white man had to respect, in a very illogical ruling. But it was the highest court in the land. And so the problem with this so-called highest court in the land, we act as if it's infallible. We act as if somehow it can make decisions that are perfect and that guides us in correct ways. Listen to what else is said. It goes on, it says, we hold that Roe and Casey, arguing another case, must be overruled. The Constitution makes no reference to abortion, and no such right is implicitly protected by any constitutional provision, including the one on which the defenders of Roe and Casey now chiefly rely. The Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. That provision has been held to guarantee some rights that are not mentioned in the Constitution, but any such right must be deeply rooted in this nation's history and tradition, and implicit in the concept of ordered liberty. Oh, did you hear those words?
Yes.
It's all like, well, you know, you go back and we can name a whole lot of things that are not implicit in the Constitution.
Yes.
Okay. the three of us on this program were one that were not implicit in that Constitution, right? And so to go back and make that argument is really disingenuous. Mm-hmm. It's not historical at all.
I think that people are so frightened by this whole situation and the possible turning back of things, not seemingly implicit in the Constitution. Is that things that people have come to understand as their rights, be it anything from the ability to have autonomy over your body, to marry who you want, to live where you want. All of these kinds of things, are laws that have only come through in really recent history. When we think back to desegregation, that was in the 50s. And, there are many people still living who were born when this country was very, very segregated. And, we're talking also about some of these same, let me go back to church folk who, would not allow people into their churches because of the color of their skin. Again, I think when we're thinking about rights that people have, these are things that have been brought to consciousness. People have structured the laws now to really protect people and their rights. And that's why this is a gateway. That's why it's dangerous, where rights can be overturned, situations can be overturned. And as crazy as it might sound, if you have people who are willing to throw out individual liberties, then what's to say that down the road, there won't be attempts to reverse, the desegregation laws, the laws around owning people, all of those kinds of things. And, it might sound crazy, but I think, again, we have to really look at where is this all leading to. When you feel like you have the right to interfere with other people and their rights, and that you can do this, and you're not living that life, it's not impacting you, you're just making decisions about something that doesn't affect you, that's dangerous.
So what do we do with this reasoning in this leaked document? And I say that like leaked because I'm not so sure it was, I don't know who leaked it. Let me put it that way. It says, Roe's abuse of judicial authority. Roe's was egregiously wrong from the start. Its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. It is time to heed the Constitution and return the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. The permissibility of abortion and the limitations upon it are to be resolved, like most important questions in our democracy, by citizens trying to persuade one another and then voting.
I think you'll often hear judges say that they're going to rule on the law.
Right.
I think it's going to be really important for legal scholars, pro-choice legal scholars, to weigh on this, to look at what's being said and to take it point by point and argue it, because ultimately the case is going to be heard based on the law. It's not going to be heard based on picket signs. It's not going to be heard based on other things, because it's going to have to be drafted as a law. And so I really think that point by point, all of these things have to be refuted and a strong case made, and education of people broadly is going to be important to help them understand. Because one of the things that happens is now there's a push in this country to really control education too, to allow what people can learn and what they can't learn. I think that, we really need to step it up and to really educate people about what's going on, because if we don't, that move will continue to try to block out what people actually learn, what people actually hear, and I believe that we just have to to approach the argument by refuting all the points.
And I also have to, I just want to inject here, and because you mentioned the statistics earlier from the, I think it's the Barnum report, oh no, Pew.
Pew Research.
So Pew did the research. This is a minority of people that are making this decision. So where is the outrage? The people have already stated what they want, how they want it, and when they want it. And it's done. And now you're trying to take back the minority position. And that kind of discounts to people. And this is a part of the dismantling piece. Then people are saying, well, look, if I get to have a vote, if I get to have a say, why is it overturned? I've already voted for that.
That's right. That's right. You already voted for it. And the issue is also is that aren't there some things that should not be subjected to a vote? If you follow what I'm saying,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The humanity
Right.
of a person should not depend on a vote. The dignity of a person, or to be treated with dignity, should not depend on a vote, right?
Exactly.
Because we are in deep trouble if everything has to depend on a vote. Because the issue is who sets the rules in a system is the one that's in control. So minorities can easily rule the majority, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I recollect, I don't think slavery ended in this country by a vote.
Come on.
We had to fight a civil war, right, in order to end slavery, because the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect during the Civil War, and it was a proclamation, right? I mean, so what I'm getting at here is like this craziness around. Let's take it back to the people. There's certain things such as the right to live should not be subjected to a vote. That should be inherent.
Absolutely.
And so, right. I mean, so this becomes offensive because even the reasoning is offensive. Because it's the reasoning that basically is saying that it's legitimate for the minority to rule the majority, to tell the majority what to do and when to do and how to do it, and to decide who has worth in that system and who does not have worth in that system. And I don't think any of us want to agree with that there should be nobody else making the decision of who has worth, who has rights, who should have dignity, who should have security, and who should have freedom of choice.
And that's the tradition that we have to fight against, because that has been what the country built itself on. Limiting people, the shortcomings, all of the dehumanizing of individuals, that has to shut down. And you will have a problem. We're not as we used to be. The tolerance of abuse, it will not be, you could call it by any name. You could call it, when certain people protest, it's a riot. And when other people's destroy, it's just a minor protest. You could use the language you want to, but people are not going to tolerate but so much abuse. We're not at the point where we're going to accept that anymore.
You're listening.
And let's also be clear that trying to vote out the ability for women to choose to have an abortion does not mean that people are going to stop having abortions. I mean, I think we also have to think about that too, which is that, you're not talking about something that's going to stop. You're just talking about whether it's going to be legal or illegal. Right. And, and it is something that many, many, many people have chosen for themselves, again, not lightly, but just given their own circumstances and what needs to happen. And I think we need to be very respectful of other people and understand that, that this is something that we want to prevent people having those back alley abortions. And we want to protect people from, just those who would just exploit their time of need. So again, I think we have to look at that as well.
If you're just listening, you're listening to WPFW, What's at Stake on 89.3 FM. We've been speaking with the Reverend Dr. Wanda Thompson, pastor of Ambassador Baptist Church, and Reverend Patricia Fears, who is pastor of Fellowship Bible Church. And we've been talking about the issue of Roe versus Wade and what's going to take place and the concerns around that. And I guess my last question, because we're almost out of time, where do we go from here? Do we push for an expansion of the Supreme Court? Do we push for a limitation of the terms of the Supreme Court? Do we push the vote for pro-choice candidates? Where do we go from here? How do we do it?
I think it's an inclusive, it's an and also situation. We do need to, since it has been determined that the court is going to be politicized, then we have to expand. And if you're going to be that, then you're going to have to limit your terms. And because you're in my neighborhood and you wanted to come into my house, I got to vote against it. So we have, as Dr. Thompson has said, educate, 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 and we have to engage. We have to engage people no matter where we are. Another comment or a word that comes up that just starts to grade me now is comfort. We can't be comfortable anymore. I'm not here for your comfort. I'm not here. If you feel uncomfortable, that's your problem. I have to make sure that these statements, these comments, these agendas move forward, because you need to know my voice can't be silenced anymore.
Dr. Thompson.
Well, I think, and this may sound simplistic, but I think the country that existed in the 1700s, 1776, is not the same country that we have right now. And we have to really look at how our branches of government really function at this time. And we need to take a really good look at that and see how can we keep the balance of power equal. Right now, SCOTUS, the Supreme Court, has, I think, too much power right now in terms of influencing what happens to a broad swath of people now. And so it might be that term limits is what's needed. We may need to have people really be much clearer about their positions on topics before they're confirmed to the court. I think that we really do need to look at the processes again by which we put people on the court and to determine whether or not it works in our contemporary society. We don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I do think that we might have to change we might have to change the soap or do whatever. We might have to really look at it again and see how do we structure it in a way that works for our society right now.
Thank you. I want to thank both of you. I want to thank Reverend Dr. Wanda Thompson, pastor of Ambassador Baptist Church, and I want to thank Reverend Patricia Fears, pastor of Fellowship Bible Church, for being with us on What's at Stake. And because we really wanted to hear from these leaders of the church, women leaders of the church, I want to emphasize. And I want to emphasize that because that's who should be leading the discussion. Reasoned women in the church, leading men. Men need to be quiet for a little bit and stop trying to control everybody's affairs and allow, in a sense, real choice and real perspective to flow and to go forward. We can't allow a court to come back and shackle people and turn back the clock, because that's really what this is about, turning back the clock on every single right that we fought for, every single right that we've won. And we're not going to allow the court or anybody else to take us back to yesterday. It's taken too much out of us to come to this place today. And so I want to thank you for being a part of What's at Stake. And we're out of time. And I look forward to being with you again on the second Wednesday of every month. I would like to thank our engineer, Michael Nasala, and the entire WPFW community. I can't wait to be with you again. I want you to be empowered, be uplifted, and be blessed, knowing that we have a lot to get done, and we will do it. Take care.